I can see that we actually have some questions in our workshop app. Thank you for sending these questions. But since time is precious, I'm choosing the first one right now. And I think it's a bit different question, because we were talking about this segregation and this vicious circle, very important topic. But actually the question is about global talent. And of course, in Estonia and in many countries, we see this vicious circle, and we have this our internal issues, social segregation. But at the same time, as Professor Tammara was mentioning, we are competing in a global market. We want to be successful. I hope Estonia wants to be successful. So, and the question to you is how to win in the global race for talents. Do you have any thoughts about that? I know it's very complex.
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult question. I have mixed feelings with this talent hunt policy, actually, because I'm not sure it's fair to countries that are not able to offer the same privileges as some countries are able to do. So I think it's from a global perspective, it's not a fair thing to do. Of course, on each individual country level, it's kind of understandable, because each country wants to be the best in the world, but the outcome is unfairness. So I don't know actually how to address this policy. I have very mixed feelings towards this. I think that if we talk about fitting in to be more successful, to empower our own people, to get connected, but to take the cream from low-income countries is already something that makes me think.
Yes. Any other thoughts?
This is really a critical question. I mean, we know at the OECD that every countries are competing to attract talents. They are offering more and more residence permit for highly skilled people with a lot of advantages and investors visa. So I won't go into the detail. But the thing is that this is true that there is that brain drain problem, that if we're attracting talents, that means it's to the detriment of low-income countries, for which those people are more likely to come, or at least to people from low-income countries will be more attracted by those kind of highly skilled residence permits and residence rights. And but unfortunately, I mean, honestly, this is my point of view. I mean, there is a competition anyway. And we are not going into maybe a more ethical attractiveness or that kind of thing. People want to attract talents. It's been for years in the United States. It's been for years in Canada and Australia. We already talked about these countries who are selecting the labor migrants according to different criteria. And now this is true that with the blue card system, it's true in the EU as well. But I mean, maybe one of them. But that doesn't mean that it really works, because we have made some studies about that, and the retention rate of those skilled people are not as high. It depends on the country, because there are always the language thing. So that means that maybe the competition, there are still competition of highly skilled, but the competition is moving more and more to the competition to attract international students, who then can have, in most countries, host country national degree and host country language proficiency, and so who can easily be integrated in the labor market of different. So I think that this is unfortunate. This is, yeah, as you said, it is unfortunate, but I think there's the real competition. But the competition is moving to international students, I think.
Thank you. And before we move to you, I actually know that, Professor, you have proposed a point system. Could that be something that can be relevant in Estonia or in other countries?
It's a bit different thing. Just to complete, I fully agree that we are in the competition situation anyway, but But just having an eye on the other side of the coin would not make an arm as well. And for example, Norway in many respects is a good example here. I know the professor Marek Tam is sitting there and he was attracted to Norway. But Norway, on the other hand, also transferred some monies to Estonia because they had attracted one talent temporarily to their country and they didn't feel good about it. So I think such eye also on the inequalities that we create with this policy would not make an arm, also in the long-term perspective. The point system is a bit different thing because the hunt for talent is a labor market type of policy, but the point system rather thinks also about the kind of the whole integration issue as well in a more complex way. It's not about the labor market, but the integration capacity of the migrants as well. Yeah, it shifts the labor market issues also towards the issues of integration.
Absolutely. Yeah. Eva?
I was just starting to think that the market is there's always been competition. It's just that the market to sell your apples is bigger. But it's always been a market. And today I feel that unfortunately you have to be either faster because China will be fast. You have to be better in terms of quality. I mean, you still produce your Swiss clocks the way you used to. Or you are very different. Like you completely innovate with a business model. Or you just bring to the market something that doesn't exist. And I think also in terms of skills, I think it's not enough, especially now in this big market, to have a good idea. It's about perseverance, that you do have the determination to go all the way and go through the challenges that weren't there before. And because it's constantly changing, the world around us, then you have to be prepared that tomorrow will be different.
Absolutely. Do we have a question from the audience, maybe, to talk in person with somebody? Any comments? And you can also comment. Doesn't have to be a question. Please.
I wrote a question to the app because I learned it, but now that you're not really
so now you can
showing
use both
it,
ways.
Yes, I wrote that Eva, I really admire what you do for the girls. It's really inspiring, and yeah, it's wonderful. But I had a question popped up that if it's in English, and we know that the English proficiency of the Russian-speaking youth is much lower usually than the Estonian-speaking, how do you make sure that you're not actually, have you addressed this, or maybe you have strategies that you're not making the segregation bigger by offering opportunities to those who have more of them anyway? Because if this language skill can become a barrier, then you are not able to address part of the local community who actually doesn't have the language skill.
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
First, you can't save the whole world. You have to start somewhere. Second, I am very conscious of that. Luckily, we are well seated today already to make sure that we have at least 40% already from very different schools, also from Russian minority, especially in Narva. And you are right, the English proficiency is different. So we're trying to also balance. So that also means that not everybody is at the exact same level of English in the program. But they do have the basic understanding, and they do learn in the program to also become more competitive for anything else that they do. And then, I mean, the good news is that the ones that didn't really use any English, let's say first few workshops, because they were too afraid. They're not confident to speak in a language because they don't have the practice. And then they suddenly started to speak because it's just, you adjust. So for them, it meant that before they weren't even thinking of, for example, applying to a scholarship, to a different, summer school, and now they do. So yes and no. So I am fully aware, but we're trying to also balance that point. Yeah.
I actually have a suggestion to all of you. Whenever you organize events, I mean, as employers or just youth leaders or integration specialists or whatever, invite people who do not speak like perfect language and don't mind the accent so much, because, you know, I think it comes down to the same question. It's so important to hear accent, and it's okay to make grammar mistakes. And we have, when we organize different seminars, and I try to keep that in mind next to, you know, like diversity that is about age or disability or gender, is to invite people who don't speak perfect English or perfect Estonian, because if we constantly see these perfect speakers with perfect language skills, you know, it's very difficult for people to jump in and to, you know, become fluent in language.
But your short answer is we have diversity in English also in the program, in terms of language skills.
Yeah, that's great. There's another question to you, Eva, on workshop, but maybe there is another questions to everybody from the audience. Anybody? Any comments? No. Okay, there's another question. I don't know, can we show that as well? So I think the question is to everybody. What are the guiding principles to lead migration to a country? Guiding principles to lead migration to a country, especially keeping in mind that the Western European labor market-driven immigration has led to increased segregation. Oh, we have the question now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure to fully understand what that means. Is the pull factors, the factors are attracting people?
I think the management is the more important word, probably, how to manage migration, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not to lead, but manage migration. I think the European migration policy, when it comes to labor migration, has been very employer-focused. I mean, it started all with the German guest worker programs after World War II, and it kind of thinking has carried on to the labor immigration policies in Europe. And the kind of outcome has been that mainly people with less skills have ended up in Europe, and that's part of the big problems. We have different sets of countries that focus on integration, like you asked Kelly about the point system, like US or Canada, or also Denmark tried this system that focuses more on the integration potential of the migrants, how likely it is that these people who arrive, they get freely or quickly adapted. And these policies bring in additional factors to labor market needs, such as language proficiency, age, existence of networks, whatever. So the question is that probably we need at least to discuss about these alternatives, so that it's not only about labor market needs that guide the migration.
Exactly. Do you have anything to add, Eva?
Yeah, maybe this is true that it's completely employer related. So this is true that the employers are choosing, but still the governments, as you said, as also include in terms of conditions of entry things like language proficiency more and more. So it's mainly employer, but still in many countries it's not possible to be employed if you don't have a certain threshold. It's not very few. No, it's not in many countries. It's true that it's very few countries. But yeah, maybe this is something that will be taken into account more and more in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see that there's one question in the audience. If we can give the mic to this gentleman, Veikos Politis.
Thank you. Actually, following the last question on the screen, I think you mentioned the German Gastarbeiter program has been as an example, but actually, even before the classical immigration countries, United States, Canada, Australia, Brazil, many Latin American countries have had the policies not only driven by the employers, but also by governments, because if we remember our own Latvian, Estonian, Lithuanian communities who moved to the West, escaping Soviet occupation, they didn't go en masse because they had to be invited either by charities or by employers or any other Canadian, American, Brazilian institutions in order to immigrate to those countries. So it's been older around in this world, but actually I think that the question here is one thing is how to get a quality employment, and here I think you answered pretty well. And education here is a key anyway. But another thing is if there is really turmoil, as we have in Syria now, how to solve these problems in a balanced way. And here there is no perfect answer. Everyone tries to do the best, but actually when there is a crisis and war, then there are extraordinary measures, and I think we've been doing pretty well, even though it has created a mass of populist antagonism in our societies.
Thank you. Actually, that was a comment. So if you don't mind, we don't take any more comments because our time is up. If you have like very short remark to add, very quickly now. But if not, thank you very much. Thank you, the audience, for your questions. Thank you, our dear distinguished panelists. It was really interesting, and I hope we talk more over the coffee and during the reception. Thank you.